Hello, and welcome to the third portion of the semester. This week and next week, we'll be exploring nutrient cycles and how humans have disrupted them, of course. Well, humans, but seriously, joking aside, understanding nutrient cycles is at the heart of understanding fundamental elements that support life on Earth. After oxygen, carbon is the second most abundant element in living organisms. All life, in all of its incredible and strange forms, consists of carbon in the form of organic molecules. And because carbon compounds contain high energy, if you think carbohydrates, for example, the movement of carbon in ecosystems follows the same paths as the movements of energy. We know fossilized organisms, also known as fossil fuels, which are primarily ancient plants, a lot of times algae, etc., that have settled down to the bottom of the ocean and then become compacted over time, are our fuel, which powers electricity, cars, airplanes, etc. This carbon takes the form of CO2, or carbon dioxide, and CH4, or methane. And both of these are greenhouse gases. And you should be familiar with some of these because we've calculated our own carbon footprint just a few weeks ago. The burning of fossil fuels, or these fossilized animals, has caused an increase in the concentration of CO2, or carbon dioxide, in our atmosphere. And of course, we know this drives climate change and other disturbances on ecosystems on the Earth. The movement of carbon through land, water, and air occurs much more slowly than the movement of carbon between living organisms. And so we often think about these reservoirs of carbon as biotic reservoirs and abiotic reservoirs of carbon. And we frequently think of the movement of carbon between these two reservoirs. So biotic living, abiotic dead. So for example, several processes drive the carbon cycle, including the decomposition of living organisms, so respiration, which returns carbon to the atmosphere as CO2, or the reverse process of photosynthesis, which removes carbon from the atmosphere as CO2 and puts it into living organisms such as algae, etc., via photosynthesis. Examples of abiotic reservoirs of carbon include the weathering of calcium carbonate-rich rocks, which increases the carbon concentration in the ocean, so the CO2 in the ocean. Or also there's sedimentation, which is the sinking, usually of algae or bits of algae, bits of organic carbon, and its burial of carbon in the sediments in the deep ocean floor. And we've also learned earlier in the semester that CO2 is easily exchanged between the atmosphere and the ocean via diffusion, so it's driven by it's driven by concentration gradients. And when we have an increase in the CO2 in ocean water, it increases the acidity. And this acidity will dissolve organisms with calcium-rich shells and coral skeletons, for example. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, climate change over these geological scales was driven by three main processes. Okay? We've learned how, number one, volcanic eruptions contributed to global climate change and mass extinctions. There have also been natural fluctuations in solar intensity that have been thought to contribute to some of the smaller ice ages in Earth's history. And then lastly, a natural process called the Milankovitch cycles, which describe these slight changes in Earth's orbit, which will affect Earth's climate. And the length of these Milankovitch cycles ranges from 19,000 to about 100,000 years. And this frequently coincides with many of the onsets and ends of some of the major ice ages. Post 18th century, deforestation and in particular the Industrial Revolution and the burning of fossil fuels are the main contributors to our current climate change and the increase of CO2 in the atmosphere. And this increase of CO2 in the atmosphere has increased temperatures, which has caused sea level rise. And this is because of the expansion of water molecules under a warmer climate. It's also caused the disappearance of glaciers, again, due to warming. Ocean acidification, which we've talked about, again, this fossil fuel burning has caused this. And we're going to be learning more about some of these different changes that have been caused due to human disturbance, deforestation, as well as fossil fuel burning. The nitrogen cycle, so just like carbon, nitrogen is essential to all life. Nitrogen makes up amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, and they're also fundamentally incorporated into the structure of nucleic acids. The largest reservoir of nitrogen is in the atmosphere as N2 gas, as well as in soil. And nitrogen in these will undergo complex changes such that it's incorporated into living and non-living materials. First of all, nitrogen fixation. So that means taking something that is inorganic, like nitrogen in the air, and making it organic or more usable for organisms. So nitrogen fixation occurs through bacteria, which convert atmospheric nitrogen into other forms that organisms can use, such as ammonium, so NH4, or nitrate, NO3. This process can also occur by lightning, wildfires, as well as the combustion of fossil fuels, which provides enough high energy to be able to break the triple bonds of nitrogen gas in the atmosphere, so those N2 bonds. Whereas nitrification occurs primarily through microbes, which convert ammonium to nitrate, making it much easier for other organisms to access. The process of assimilation occurs when primary producers, like plants, for example, take up inorganic nitrogen from the soil and they incorporate it into their plant tissues as organic nitrogen compounds, so amino acids, proteins, etc. And then the primary consumers, or herbivores, are vegetarians. They assimilate nitrogen from the primary producers, which they've consumed, so our grasses, plants, etc. And they then excrete it as waste via a metabolic process. Mineralization takes this excreted waste and breaks down organic nitrogen compounds, or nitrogen that's contained in organic matter, into inorganic nitrogen compounds. So it's taking organic nitrogen, so it could be urea, it could be some of your DNA or your proteins or your amino acids, and it's breaking it down back into inorganic forms. So ammonium, again, or nitrate, and this is usually done by decomposers such as bacteria and fungi, which will return these inorganic nutrients back to the soils. And then finally, the process of denitrification takes nitrates in the soil and they are converted into nitrogen gas and then released back into the atmosphere by denitrifying bacteria. And this usually occurs in areas where we have really low or no oxygen. So this is the last step of the nitrogen cycle. So as you are reading, try to find the connections between human impacts and the carbon and nitrogen cycles. And this will help you build your concept map, which you have a choice of this week, either a carbon or a nitrogen-based perceptive concept map. Hang in there. I want to say we are almost done. The light is there at the end of the tunnel, and I look forward to seeing your maps, and I will, hopefully you'll tune in again with me next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.